Wheelchair Sports, Hang Glider to Wheeler Dealer by Simon Shapiro. Art by Theo Kreinow and Warwick Goldswain. Before you jump off a mountain, there are a few things you have to do. Usually, Marilyn Hamilton did them all and had a great time soaring in California's Sierra Mountain Range under her hang glider. But one day in 1978, she forgot to clip her harness to the glider. She was lucky not to be killed, but the crash broke her back. At the age of 29, Hamilton's life changed forever. But the lives of millions of others would also be changed by that simple mistake. Hamilton was never able to walk again. After a stay in the hospital and 3 weeks of therapy, she was given a wheelchair and encouraged to get on with her life. She was eager to do that, but worried about the things she would never be able to do again, like running, biking, squash and racquetball, hiking, and hang gliding. Still, Hamilton was determined to live a full and active life and ready to try new things. Regular tennis was out, but a friend got her started on wheelchair tennis. It was frustratingly difficult, and she'd come home from the courts at the end of the day with badly blistered hands. She hated her wheelchair. Its steel frame made it heavy, close to 27 kilograms, or 60 pounds, and hard to maneuver. And it was ugly. Being imprisoned in that wheelchair was the exact opposite of being able to fly in a hang glider. One day, that difference gave her an idea. Maneuver. To maneuver something is to move it. In her new wheelchair, Marilyn Hamilton excelled at tennis, winning the U.S. Open Women's Wheelchair Championship twice, both in singles and doubles. Eventually, she did get her yellow wheelchair. Hamilton talked to two friends who made hang gliders. She persuaded them to build her a new wheelchair using hang glider technology. An aluminum frame made it strong but light. It was half the weight of her regular chair, and she could really move in it. It even looked good. In fact, the only thing that stopped it from being absolutely perfect was that it was blue. She would have preferred yellow. Hamilton and her friends knew they were onto something. Hamilton couldn't be the only one out there looking for a lighter, speedier chair. They formed a company to make and sell quickie wheelchairs and specialized in meeting the needs of athletes. The company was hugely successful. Specialized. If a company specialized in something, it provided a specific type of product. Wheelchair sports. Wheelchair sports can be very competitive and very demanding. Elite wheelchair athletes have an awesome level of fitness, skill, and upper body strength. Wheelchair basketball is very similar to stand-up basketball. Rules are adapted for wheelchairs. For example, only 2 pushes are allowed before a player must dribble the ball. Wheelchair rugby was developed by a group of Canadian athletes whose reduced arm and hand functions didn't allow them to compete equally in basketball. The objective is to carry the ball over the opponent's goal line. Elite. Elite members of a group are those who are the best or most skilled. Objective. An objective is a goal. Why they're better. The reasons why a lightweight wheelchair is better for athletes than a traditional wheelchair are pretty easy to understand. In fact, Sir Isaac Newton figured out the exact math formulas to explain the stuff back in 1687. But here are the basics. To move something heavy, you have to push harder. Given the same push, something light will go faster than something heavy, and it's easier to slow down a lighter object than a heavier one. So it's obvious that a lighter wheelchair will let an athlete move faster, stop faster, and change direction easily. The only thing that isn't obvious is why no one built a light wheelchair for athletes sooner. It seems this invention had to wait for Marilyn Hamilton. Not only did she understand the need, she also had the connection to hang gliding technology that turned a dream into a reality. The lightness of the Quickie was the biggest innovation. But Hamilton and her friends didn't stop there. They worked hard to figure out what else an athlete would need. In the end, the Quickie was made more stable by giving it a lower center of mass and a wider wheelbase than a traditional wheelchair. An object will tip over when the center of mass is directly over the point of tipping. The diagram above shows that with a lower center of mass and a wider wheelbase, the sports wheelchair must be pushed to a much greater angle before it tips. A regular wheelchair tips over fairly easily. Center of mass. The vertical dotted black line shows that the center of mass is directly over the tipping point. Traditional. Something that is traditional has been made or done in a certain way for a very long time. With a wheelchair, the center of mass is made lower by setting the seat lower. The Quickie also lets athletes adjust the height themselves. The wheelbase is made wider by using negative cambered wheels. This means that the wheels aren't vertical. Instead, they're angled so that the tops of the wheels are closer together than the bottoms. Another advantage of the negative cambered wheels is that the athlete can reach the wheel more easily. The top part of the wheel is close to the athlete's body, so the hands push almost in line with the athlete's shoulders and not out to the side. This lets you push harder. The diagram shows how this works. The shoulder is the fulcrum, and the muscles in the upper arm provide the effort. The output force is delivered through the hand. The farther away your hand is from your shoulder when you push, the less output force you have. Tipping points and center of mass. If you want to feel how the center of mass tipping point principle works, grab a can of vegetables from the kitchen cupboard. Now mark the middle of the label with a dot. The center of mass is in the middle of the can, right behind that mark. With the mark facing you, hold the can on its edge just where it's balanced but about to tip over. Notice where the dot is? Right above the edge of the can. Now do the same thing with a shorter can, like the kind tuna comes in. There's no doubt which is more stable. Gutmann's great idea. Dr. Ludwig Gutmann was a German brain surgeon who fled to England before the Second World War. During the war, he was in charge of Stoke Mandeville Hospital, a place that treated soldiers with spinal cord injuries. Before Gutmann, these patients were left to lie in bed doing nothing. They would get painful bed sores, bladder and kidney infections, and would often die after several miserable months. No one expected them to become active again. Gutmann refused to accept this. He believed he could use sports as a way to get patients active and out of bed. He got a sergeant assigned to the hospital to play catch with patients in bed using a heavy medicine ball. They needed to build up enough arm strength to lift themselves into a wheelchair. Then the games really began. Activity wasn't optional. It was prescribed medicine. Patients had archery and darts, pool and table tennis. They invented wheelchair polo and wheelchair basketball. Amazingly, patients were soon being discharged from the hospital to go home and live active lives. In 1948, Gutmann held the first annual wheelchair competition at the hospital. In 1952, Dutch competitors made these games international. 8 years later, they were held parallel to the Olympics. The Paralympics are now held immediately following the Olympics in the same cities. In 1960, Gutmann watched 300 athletes enter Rome's Olympic Stadium for the first Paralympics Games. That number's now increased to over 4,000 athletes.